What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you my wide receiver starts and sits. As you guys know, every Thursday we are going to be going over every single matchup, every single fantasy relevant wide receiver and tight end for fantasy football in week 3 this week. We're going to be going over their wide receiver cornerback matchups, some of the utilization reports that are important for the position. So the obvious names I'm going to kind of skim over. You guys know to start those guys, but we'll get deep and work through some of these tough wide receiver cores together. I'm going to be making reference to my rankings a lot in this video. So if you guys want access to my rankings, there's 3 ways you can get it. You can go to our website, buy my rankings and Danny's rankings for $20 at thefantasystockexchange.com. You can go to underdogfantasy.com, deposit using promo code FSE. You'll get $10 on top of whatever you deposit, and you'll also get our rankings for free. You can play some of the games that Underdog has to offer there, or you can go to patreon.com/fantasy-stock-exchange, become a Patreon, and get the rankings that way. So 3 ways you can get the rankings. But before we get into it, as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, anything that you want to comment it down below. We will answer you, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're going to hit the intro, and then we're going to get into the first game. Panthers at Texans, Thursday night football. Start DJ Moore in this matchup, start Brandon Cooks in this matchup, and flex Robbie Anderson in this matchup. So starting with the Panthers side of things, as you guys can see on the screen, these are the wide receiver cornerback matchups that we're expecting to see. Vernon Hargreaves III is a terrible corner. He is not going to be able to stick with DJ Moore one bit. So if you guys were worried about DJ Moore in any way, this is a guy that is legitimately in my top 15 receivers for the week. I think he's going to absolutely go hog wild in this one. If you guys are playing DFS or a showdown lineup, I highly suggest you put him in your captain slot, because it's a good way to fade Christian McCaffrey, basically, who everybody's going to put in their captain slot. So I think that's kind of like a contrarian play for large tournaments. Anyway, on the Robbie Anderson side of things, I'm very concerned with Robbie Anderson, which is why I actually traded him away in my home league. I traded Robbie Anderson and Rondale Moore away for Brandon Ayuk because I really love Brandon Ayuk. I think he's going to bounce back. He's kind of a buy low target for me. So I traded away Robbie Anderson. And the reason is because DJ Moore is the number 1 receiver on this team. Christian McCaffrey is the number 2 wide receiver on this team. And Robbie Anderson is the downfield wide receiver 3 competing for targets with Terrace Marshall, who's, a very talented rookie in his own right. So Robbie Anderson, currently my wide receiver 39 on the week because it is a good matchup. He's got big play potential, but I am nervous about him long-term. As you guys can see on the screen right now, he is running 86% of the routes, 88% total on the season, which is what that 0 means, just for the record. I didn't actually specify that in the running back video yesterday. If you guys see week 0, it just means both of the weeks on average. But as you guys can see, his average depth of target so far this year, Robbie Anderson's, is 22.3, which is exactly what we saw in his New York Jets days when he was an inconsistent wide receiver 3. What we saw last year was him used more as a possession number 1 receiver. That is how DJ Moore is being deployed. And that's a good thing because that's how it should have been last year. But we're seeing a shift in how Joe Brady's offense is being operated. DJ Moore is the number 1 receiver on this team. Robbie Anderson is not. So if you can buy low on DJ Moore, go ahead and do that. If you can sell on Robbie Anderson, maybe after this game, he might catch a long touchdown or something like that, I would do that as well. So on the Texans side of things, Brandon Cooks takes a slight downtick with Tyrod Taylor out, but this is a bona fide number 1 receiver. As you guys can see on the screen, he is clearly running the most routes on the team, 95%, 35% of the targets for Brandon Cooks as well, 54% of the air yards, 46% of the targets on 3rd and 4th down. This is the go-to guy for this offense. He is set to see J.C. Horn and A.J. Boye, depending on which side he lines up in this game. So the Panthers secondary has low-key been pretty good so far this season. So they actually have a real test now with Brandon Cooks, who's a talented receiver, unlike the Saints receivers that they were playing and the Jets receivers other than Corey Davis in week 1. They had a pretty easy time stopping those guys. So this Panthers defense might actually have some kind of a challenge with Brandon Cooks. But again, we have Davis Mills starting at quarterback, so I don't know how much I want to put stock into that. On the tight end side of things in this game, there's absolutely no tight ends to speak of, so don't worry about that. To the next game that we have here, Chargers at Chiefs. Start all 3 of the main receivers in this game. So Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. Currently the highest over-under of the 1 o'clock games right now at 55. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are every week starters, as you guys can see on the screen. Could be a Keenan Allen week. Last week we saw Keenan Allen shadowed by Trevon Diggs, who so far for the Cowboys is having a pretty good season. So we saw Mike Williams have another big game. but I think this game could be a big Keenan Allen game. L'Jarius Sneed is a pretty good corner, but he's more of like a turnover creator type corner than he is like a true lockdown guy. So I think Keenan Allen could be in for a big game in this one. Mike Williams, though, has been on fire to start the season, and this game will probably be no different. So I'm firing Mike Williams up as a top 30 receiver yet again. The one thing I am concerned about, though, overall of this Chargers offense is the fact that they're not scoring a whole lot, which is kind of weird because I thought they'd be like a 30-point per game type of offense with Justin Herbert, but so far they've kind of struggled to put points on the board. And against the Cowboys defense last week, I didn't think that would be the case. And as you guys can see on the screen, we have a 26% target share for Mike Williams, which is more than Keenan Allen. He's also getting targeted more on the routes that he's running. Keenan Allen is actually being used more downfield than Mike Williams is, but both guys are kind of possession receivers. Air yards are pretty equal. End zone targets in favor of Mike Williams. Third and fourth down targets, though, in favor of Keenan Allen. So both of these guys are a lot closer in terms of their usage. I thought this would be the Keenan Allen show this year coming into the season. It's not looking like that as of right now. At the tight end position, you guys know to start Travis Kelce every week. He is a stud. 88% of his games over the last 3 years have been tight end one performances, which is an absolutely absurd number that I saw on Twitter. Start Jared Cook as well. I think this is a guy that is a borderline every week starter at tight end because of what we've seen from the Chargers offense. They're top 5 in pace of play. I think they're going to be good enough to support 3 options, and Cook still looks pretty spry, if I do say so myself. Jared Cook running 65% of the routes, a 15% target share, being targeted on 19% of the time that he is running a route as well. On to the next game, Cardinals at Jaguars. We have DeAndre Hopkins obviously is an every week starter. Low end flex either of the Cardinals' other receivers, so Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk most notably. And I think you can low end flex pretty much any one of the Jags wide receivers, although I'm really not excited about any of them outside of kind of Marvin Jones, I suppose. So on the Cardinals side of things, as you guys can see on the screen, he is a pretty big matchup advantage over CJ Henderson. And I would say for any other team, this matchup chart is somewhat important. For the Cardinals, it's very important because the Cardinals don't move their receivers around at all. They use DeAndre Hopkins on the left side of the field all the time. Pretty much 51 projected snaps. He's going to be against CJ Henderson because he does not move from that left side of the field. Same goes for AJ Green on the right side. Christian Kirk in the slot, he plays the majority of those roles. And then Rondale Moore is mixed in the slot as well. And when they play 4 wide receiver sets. So I know everybody's super excited about Rondale Moore, but as I just kind of talked about, Christian Kirk isn't going away. He's a top 3 receiver right now in PFF grade, and he's played pretty well. So I don't expect Rondale Moore to suddenly take over the slot job. Sure, if you see on the screen right now, last week from week 1 to week 2, he increased his route participation, and he also got more targets, but he's still the 4th receiver on this team as of right now. Now, if they bench Christian Kirk for whatever reason, or AJ Green or something, and Rondale Moore suddenly playing like 80, 90% of the route participation, then I'll change my tune. But I think Rondale Moore is one of the biggest sell highs right now in fantasy. And I sold him high, as I talked about already, with Rondale Moore and Robbie Anderson for Brandon Ayuk. Now, maybe I could have gotten something better than that, but I view Brandon Ayuk as a great option this year. So because of the buzz, I was able to sell Rondale Moore high, and I suggest you do the same as if possible. And on the Jag side of things, I think it's a bit of a different story. As you guys can see on the screen right now, Laviska Shenault, DJ Chark, and Marvin Jones, they all kind of have so-so matchups. It looks like DJ Chark has a pretty good matchup in this one. Marvin Jones is the number 1 receiver on this team, running 92% of the routes. DJ Chark is the opposite outside receiver, running 84% of the routes. And Marvin Jones getting all the targets, getting high depth of target, getting a good share of the air yards and the end zone targets currently of the offense. He's the guy that I would start if I'm going to start a Jags receiver, but all 3 of these guys are kind of in that 35 to 45 range for me. I think Shenault actually is around 50 for me right now. So if I could start these guys, it would go Marvin Jones around the 30 to 40 range, then DJ Chark around that 40 to 45 range, and then Laviska Shenault 45 plus. So that's the way I view the Jags receivers. At tight end, there's no tight ends to speak of in this game, so we can move on to Bears at Browns. In this game, obviously, you're going to be starting Allen Robinson. You're going to flex Odell Beckham if he plays, and flex Darnell Mooney. So I'll start on the Bears side of things. Allen Robinson's had a slow start to the year so far. I think he's a good buy low candidate if you can swing a trade for him, because he hasn't been very good so far this season, but he is getting the routes. He is getting the targets, everything that we want to see at Allen Robinson. And now that Justin Fields is the starting quarterback for the Bears, we'll have to see how that impacts the team. Maybe they run more. Like, they were a top 10 passing team last year in terms of pass percentage. So with Justin Fields as a starting quarterback, does this positively impact Allen Robinson? Could impact him positively from an efficiency standpoint, but his volume could go down. And same goes for Darnell Mooney. All that kind of applies to him as well. I think he's a good flex play in this matchup. as you guys can see on the screen, Allen Robinson set to see a lot of Troy Hill. Darnell Mooney set to see a lot of Greg Newsome. Of course, they'll see a little bit of Denzel Ward as well. So that's kind of how it works out for the Bears right now. I would start Darnell Mooney as a, top 45 receiver flex play, and Allen Robinson is a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy this week. OBJ on the other side of things was a full participant yesterday in practice. It looks like he's going to make his debut in this game. He did talk about we'll see or whatever was the quote that came out today. But if Odell Beckham plays, I think you can comfortably start him in this game. Stash Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you guys haven't already done so, stash Donovan Peoples-Jones at the end of your bench. Do not stash Anthony Schwartz, because Anthony Schwartz, one, is a speed receiver, one-trick pony type of receiver, which isn't usually good for fantasy. And two, as you guys can see on the screen, Donovan Peoples-Jones, behind Jarvis Landry last week, obviously, is running the most routes of any wide receiver for the Browns. And with Landry out and Beckham in, you can imagine that in two wide receiver sets, it's going to be Odell Beckham on one side and Donovan Peoples-Jones on the other side. And when they go to three wide receiver sets, then one of those guys is going to move to the slot, whether it's Schwartz, whether it's DPJ, or whether it's Odell Beckham Jr. So that's the way that I expect the Browns receiving core to shake. As you guys can see on the screen, it looks like Rashard Higgins was set to be on Jalen Johnson, but Odell Beckham will be replacing him in the depth chart. So that is where OBJ is going to line up Donovan Peoples-Jones against Kindle Vildor. He could have, a breakout game in this one and be a hot waiver wire ad next week. Get ahead of the curve, go add him now, so that if he's a hot waiver wire ad, maybe you could sell him high, or maybe you actually have something that you can use in your flex spot going forward. So at the tight end position, you're going to be starting Cole Kmet. He is clearly the starting tight end for this team. The issue with Cole Kmet, though, is that his ADOT is very low. It's less than 5 yards right now. So he's probably going to need touchdowns to be fantasy relevant, as we saw from Jimmy Graham at the beginning of last year. So Cole Kmet, a guy that you can throw into your lineup as a top 15 tight end, but nothing probably more than that, given the fact that he's being used closer to the line of scrimmage. Sit Austin Hooper in this game. He's splitting snaps with David Njoku, another low ADOT tight end in his own right. 5 for 40 performance is what we saw last week from Austin Hooper. I think that's kind of like his weekly ceiling, if I'm being honest, and what you're going to get every week if you don't get a touchdown. On to the Washington football team at the Buffalo Bills. In this game, you're going to be starting the two studs, Stephon Diggs and Terry McLaurin. I think you can flex Cole Beasley pretty comfortably in this game. Sit De'Ami Brown, but stash him on the end of your bench. My dumb ass faded Terry McLaurin because of James Bradbury, but I'm not letting that happen again. He is set to see Tre'Davious White in coverage, not necessarily shadow, but they move him around so much. And he's also just a really good player as well. And he beat James Bradbury for the touchdown catch that he had on Thursday. I'm not worried about Terry McLaurin in most matchups because he usually gets moved into the slot. He gets moved side to side, things of that nature, to get him off of these high-end corners that are going to be on him. So fire up Terry McLaurin with no worries. De'Ami Brown, as I talked about, should be one of the best stashes in fantasy right now. He's running 90% of the routes, has a 16% target share, and he's flashing left, right, and center. So De'Ami Brown is a guy that I think could be very valuable as the season goes along, as Curtis Samuel continues to be out, as it looks like right now. So make sure if you have an open bench spot and De'Ami Brown is on your waiver wire, go ahead and pick him up and throw him at the end of your bench to see what happens. The Washington defense on the other side of things has been quite average so far this year against the pass. And the Bills have a good offensive line, so I think they can withstand some of the pass rush presence of Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So I think they're going to be able to get a lot of stuff going in this game. I really like Stephon Diggs versus Ben St-Juste in this matchup. And I really like Cole Beasley in the slot against Kyle Fuller. So I think both of these guys are going to be kind of a sneaky GPP DFS play. If you wanted to stack Allen, Diggs, and Beasley, I think they're all going to have pretty good games in this one, especially Stephon Diggs against Ben St-Juste. I think he's going to go absolutely hog wild. At tight end, you fire up Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas is currently running 93% of the Washington football team routes, which is more than any other tight end in the league, which is actually insane. He's running more routes in terms of his team's route participation than Travis Kelce, than George Kittle, than Mark Andrews, than TJ Hawkinson, than all of these other tight ends that are probably ranked higher than him in most tight end rankings. And while I still would take those guys over Logan Thomas, the usage of a tight end is very important because he's being used in the slot. He's being used out wide. He's being used on routes in general. So that is exactly what you want to see if you're a Logan Thomas owner. He's outrunning routes, not blocking. That's exactly what you want out of your tight end. So the Colts at Titans, the next game that we have here, start both of the Tennessee Titans stud wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. And I think you can low-end flex both of the Colts wide receivers in this game. On the Colts side of things, these guys are clearly the 1 and 2 of this offense, with Pittman Jr. running 100% of the routes and Zach Pascal running 97% of the routes, respectively. I think these two guys are the number 1 and 2 receiver for this team. Michael Pittman set to see a lot of Christian Fulton. Zach Pascal set to see a lot of Chris Jackson in coverage. These two guys, as I mentioned, you can low-end flex both of them, but I'm not overly excited about either guy. I think this is the get-right game, though, for the Titans passing offense on the other side of things. We saw Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp dissect this Colts defense. We saw Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett dissect this Colts defense. I think Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are going to get some work done in this game. With Julio Jones against TJ Carey, with A.J. Brown against Rock Ya-Sin, these are both great matchups for both of these guys. And again, another good, probably a good GPP play in tournaments with Ryan Tannehill, Julio Jones, and A.J. Brown. I think these guys are going to have a big game in this one. And at the tight end position, there is no tight ends to speak of in this matchup. I don't trust any Colts tight ends, nor do I trust any Tennessee Titans tight ends. Now, heading over to the Saints at the Patriots. At wide receiver in this game, you can flex Jacoby Myers, dart throw on Nelson Agholor or Marquez Callaway. So nobody in this game is really exciting at wide receiver, but Jacoby Myers has a great target share, 25% in week 1, 21% in week 2. So in my opinion, he's a weekly flex play that you can pretty much throw into your lineup whenever. Nelson Agholor, you're kind of just hoping for a big play. So he's kind of just a desperation flex, not a guy that I'm willing to throw into my lineup each and every week. As you guys can see the matchups on the screen there, Jacoby Myers will see a lot of PJ Williams in the slot, should be able to take care of that matchup. Nelson Agholor, a bit of a tougher matchup against Bradley Roby on the outside. Looks like Marshawn Lattimore still slated to probably be out for this game. So that is an upgrade to the passing game in general, but those are the matchups as you guys can see them. Marquez Callaway on the Saints side of things is still the number one on this team, running 80+% of the routes in both of the games, but the team is not throwing him the ball enough. He's not getting a lot of targets in this offense because despite playing from behind last week, Jameis Winston only threw the ball 22 times. This is not an offense that is designed to throw the ball a lot. It's designed to run through Alvin Kamara. It's designed to run through Taysom Hill, run through Tony Jones in the run game, and probably play good, sound defensive football. So Marquez Callaway is a guy that is a number one receiver technically for his team, but he's not a guy that is overly valuable, not a guy that I want to throw into my lineup week in and week out. And this is a pretty tough matchup for him. So I don't really want to throw him into my lineup if I can help it. At the tight end position, no Saints tight ends that I really care about. But at the Patriots side of things, stream Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry. It really doesn't matter at this point because as you guys can see on the screen, they're kind of running similar routes. They're being used in different ways, sure, but they're both on the field a pretty equal amount of time. So after Cole Kmet and Jared Cook in my tight end rankings, which is like my tight end 13 and 14, I think there's a huge drop off in tight ends. And I have both of these Patriots tight ends in that range right after those guys. So if I had to pick one, I would start Jonnu, but I don't really want to start any of these guys. I'm not overly excited about any of them. Falcons at Giants, start Calvin Ridley, flex Sterling Shepard, and flex Kenny Golladay. When we look at Calvin Ridley's side of things, he is expected to be shadowed by James Bradberry in this game. Calvin Ridley is good enough on his own to beat James Bradberry, as we saw from Terry McLaurin last week, but it does downgrade Calvin Ridley in the sense that he is facing a good matchup, a good corner. So that is a bit of a concern for him, but still fire him up into your lineups. On the Giants side of things, this Falcons defense is pretty bad. It's going to give up a lot of points to the wide receiver position, and Sterling Shepard and Kenny Golladay specifically, they face a defense that is literally giving up 5 touchdowns so far in the first 2 games of the season to wide receivers. So after seeing what Mike Evans did to Fabian Moreau last week, I'm predicting that this is the first big game out of Kenny Golladay. I think this is the first game that we see Kenny Golladay catch a long touchdown or score a touchdown in the red zone or something like that. So Kenny Golladay, if you guys have him on your team, fire him up into your flex spot or into your lineup as your wide receiver 3 or something like that, because I think he's going to have a big game in this one. Sterling Shepard also with a pretty easy matchup against Isaiah Oliver in the slot. We saw Chris Godwin get some things done against him as well. So both of those guys, pretty solid starts in this one, both top 40 receivers for me. At the tight end position, Kyle Pitts is a start, 80% of the routes yet again. But the only kind of concern for Kyle Pitts is how good is this Falcons offense going to be in general? Matt Ryan hasn't looked very good, but the 15% target share so far that we've seen out of Kyle Pitts is definitely encouraging to see. So I'm optimistic about his outlook. Bengals at Steelers, the next game that we have here. I think you can pretty much start every wide receiver in this game. The Bengals side is easy as all 3 are startable each and every week, in my opinion. As you guys can see, Trey Norwood versus Tyler Boyd in the slot should be a good matchup for Tyler Boyd. Could be a big game for him. Jamar Chase with a bit of a harder matchup against Cam Sutton. T. Higgins against James Pierre. He should be able to get some stuff done. So could be a bit of a down game for Jamar Chase in this one. But as we've seen so far out of Jamar Chase, he's had a good target share. He's been involved as a rookie receiver. So I'm very impressed with what I've seen out of him. All 3 receivers on the Bengals side are startable in this game. So on the Steelers side of things, there's a little bit more complex because Deontay Johnson is currently dealing with a knee injury right now. And if Deontay Johnson plays in this game, I'm still willing to start him. But if he does play, I'm going to sit Juju Smith-Schuster in this game because the Bengals defense has actually been pretty good against the pass and against the run. So I'm not a big Juju guy. You guys know this. So I'm not going to be starting him in this game if Deontay Johnson plays. But if he doesn't play, then you can start Juju Smith-Schuster in this matchup. Chase Claypool, you're throwing into your lineup regardless. Deontay Johnson did miss practice today with the knee injury that he's dealing with. It doesn't sound like it's serious, but it could be, an MCL sprain or something like what's similar to what Jarvis Landry is dealing with. And if Jarvis Landry is being put on IR with this injury, maybe it's a little bit more minor with Deontay Johnson and he can play through it. So at the tight end position in this game, you don't start CJ Uzomah or Pat Freiermuth or anybody like that. So you can not worry about that position in this game. Ravens at Lions, the wide receivers are pretty simple in this game. Only start Hollywood Brown in this game. Don't start Sammy Watkins. Don't start a Lions wide receiver. Hollywood has gotten an absurd 31% target share so far this season. I'm not buying into the fact that he's like an elite fantasy wide receiver all of a sudden, but I do think this is a guy that's going to be a weekly wide receiver 3. And this is an absolute smash matchup against the Lions secondary, down 2 of their 3 top corners from the beginning of the season. And their top corners to begin with weren't very good as well. So as you guys can see on the screen, Marquise Brown going up against Amani Oruwariye out on the outside should be an easy matchup for Marquise Brown. I expect him to have a big game in this one. As I mentioned, sit all the Lions wide receivers, Quintez Cephas, Khalif Raymond, whatever you were thinking of playing, don't play them because pretty tough matchup for these guys against the Ravens secondary. And those receivers are all just kind of bad, not very good players in their own right. And I can't rely on any of them. So the tight end position, again, both guys are studs, Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson. Both guys are into your lineup. Mark Andrews has gotten off to a bit of a slow start, but he could have a huge game in this one against the Lions defense that has just not been good against tight ends. We saw Robert Tonyan take advantage of them. George Kittle had splash plays in week 1, didn't necessarily have a massive game, but I think this defense is susceptible to the tight end position. So Mark Andrews could have his big game this week. All right, now we're on to the 4 p.m. games. The Jets at the Broncos, the first one that we have here. Start Cortland Sutton in this game, flex Corey Davis, and I think you can low-end flex Elijah Moore as well. Cortland Sutton is an every week starter. We saw it last week. He showed up as a true number 1 wide receiver with Jerry Jeudy out. 35% of the targets, 68% of the Broncos air yards, and 100% of the end zone targets for the team. As you guys can see on the screen, his matchup against Eccles on the outside should be light work for him. So I'm not worried about Cortland Sutton whatsoever. He's in my top 24 to start this week, should be in a smash spot. On the Jets side of things, it's tough to start either guy with how Zach Wilson played last week, but I think we're going to see a better game out of Zach Wilson. Again, he was going up against the Patriots. Bill Belichick against a rookie quarterback. Definitely a tough matchup for him to succeed in, and this isn't an easy matchup by any means. The Broncos secondary has looked really good. Their defense has looked good in general, but I'm still willing to fire up Corey Davis as a flex play and then Elijah Moore as a deep flex play because I think Zach Wilson is going to rebound in this game. Both of these 2 receivers are top targets at 18% of the target share each. And Elijah Moore had a 26% target share last week, which was encouraging to see. Obviously, you guys can see the matchups on the screen there. Corey Davis against Pat Surtain, who's looked pretty good in his rookie season. Elijah Moore against Pat Surtain and Kyle Fuller as well. So those matchups a little bit tougher, but I think they can actually get some production done in this game. Could be playing from behind, could be a lot of pass attempts in this one. So I feel semi-confident in Corey Davis and then a good dart throw in Elijah Moore. So at the tight end position in this game, Noah Fant is pretty much an every week starter. The 2 tight end sets that they're deploying with him and Albert Okwuegbunam are a little bit concerning, but his routes and his targets are still there. He's still running like 69% of the routes, 19% target share. So I'm very intrigued with Noah Fant. I think he's going to be a pretty good tight end option for the rest of the season. Now, to the next game that we have here, Dolphins at Raiders. Nobody is a locked-in start this week at wide receiver, in my opinion. I think you can flex Jalen Waddle and flex Will Fuller if he's going to play in this one. But I'm not excited about Jacoby Brissett being the starting quarterback, and a Raiders defense that has actually played pretty well so far this season. Kind of makes me nervous if I'm starting either of these Dolphins wide receivers. Both of those guys are around wide receiver 42 to 45 for me. And as you guys can see on the screen, Jalen Waddle against Nate Hobbs in the slot. Nate Hobbs has actually been pretty good as their slot corner, and Will Fuller as against Casey Hayward on the outside. Casey Hayward has been phenomenal. He made a number of plays against Chase Claypool last week. So that makes me a little bit nervous about Will Fuller as well. So overall, I'm not overly excited about these Dolphins receivers, but I do think you can play them if you need to. And then on the Raiders side of things, I think you can desperation play both Raiders wide receivers, Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs, but not a great matchup for the Raiders wide receivers. I would sit them if you can, as you guys can see on the screen. Xavier Howard, a lot of time going to be spent on Henry Ruggs, and Byron Jones, a lot of time spent on Bryan Edwards. So I'm not excited about any of those guys. At the tight end position, always start Darren Waller. He's a superstar. He's a stud tight end. And I suppose you can stream Mike Gesicki in this matchup. Now, I don't really want to, but he's running 60-ish% of the routes. He got 6 targets last week. Both of the wide receivers have tougher matchups. So maybe you can use Mike Gesicki in this game, but I think you should have better options to play. The next game that we have here is my Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Los Angeles Rams. In this game, I think you can start Mike Evans, start Chris Godwin, and start Cooper Kupp. You can flex Robert Woods and Antonio Brown if he ends up playing. Now, Antonio Brown is on the COVID list, and it sounds like he actually has COVID as well. So he's going to need to test negative twice before he can play in this game. He is vaccinated because the Bucs have a 100% vaccination rate across the board. So I'd imagine Antonio Brown could be okay for this game. But if he's out, obviously that upgrades Evans, Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski from that perspective. So I tried to tell y'all, though, about Antonio Brown. I hope you sold him. If you could sell him to an owner in your league that thought Antonio Brown was going to be the number one receiver in this offense, I'm here to tell you he's not. I told you this last week. It has been confirmed with another week of data. Obviously, as you guys can see, the route participation for Antonio Brown is not on the level that it is for Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, 88%, 98% of the routes respectively. Antonio Brown, 72% and 50% the last 2 weeks that we've seen. So Antonio Brown, if he plays, again, he's still the number 3 receiver on this team. Could have a big game in this one with Jalen Ramsey, maybe potentially shadowing Mike Evans. Jalen Ramsey isn't asked to shadow receivers often, but when it is, it's usually big physical receivers like Mike Evans, like DK Metcalf, like Allen Robinson, guys like that. So he shadowed him last year in the matchup that they played, Jalen Ramsey on Mike Evans. Mike Evans was still able to produce, but if Antonio Brown is out for this game, I'm not really worried about Mike Evans whatsoever. I'm still going to start both him and Chris Godwin as top 15 options. And Chris Godwin's actually my top 10 because I think he's just going to have a monster game in this one with Mike Evans having a tough matchup. As you guys can see on the screen, it says that Jalen Ramsey is going to be on the slot against Chris Godwin, but if he shadows Mike Evans, he's going to be on Mike Evans. I don't think I'm all that concerned about Chris Godwin one bit in this matchup. And on the Rams side of things, I think this could be yet another massive game for Cooper Kupp. He has had 2 awesome games so far, and I think he's going to have another one in this one because as you guys can see, he's set to see Ross Cockrell in the slot, who is the worst corner on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers starting roster. And not only that, but Robert Woods is set to see a lot of Carlton Davis, who is by far the best corner on this team. And they never throw at Carlton Davis, the opposing team. So if Robert Woods sees a lot of Carlton Davis, I don't expect a lot of targets out of Robert Woods in this game because teams generally just shy away from throwing at Carlton Davis and they'll attack the other 2 Bucs corners, which is where Cooper Kupp is going to be in this game. And as you guys can see on the screen, Cooper Kupp has played Tampa Bay twice in the last 2 years, and his lines in those 2 games are absurd. 28 combined targets over a 2-game stretch, 11 receptions and 9 receptions, 121 yards, 145 yards, and a touchdown in one of those games. Carlton Davis, like I said, is going to be on Robert Woods, could be another big Cooper Kupp game. And if you guys are playing DFS, I know he's going to be chalky, but throw him into your lineup. The tight end position, both are every week top 12 guys, in my opinion. So you can fire both of these tight ends up. This one should be high scoring as well. Currently set at 56 on the over-under. It is the highest of all of the week 3 slate. So this game, they expect to be high scoring. Both of these defenses haven't been quite as dominant as we expected them to be. I think there's going to be a lot of passing in this game, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of production, a lot of scoring. So you want pieces of this game for sure. The Seahawks at Vikings, another game that I think you're going to want pieces of. Again, start the usual suspects in this game. Both Seahawks receivers are auto starts. Both of the top 2 Vikings wide receivers are auto starts as well. I suppose you can desperation flex KJ Osborne, who's gotten out to a good start so far for the Vikings. But if you have KJ Osborne, what I'd be looking to do with KJ Osborne is use him as a sweetener in another trade, or use him as a biscuit, as we call him in our league. In my home league, that's what we call players like KJ Osborne. So, for example, if you want to trade away Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I think you should if you own Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you want to trade him straight up for Miles Sanders, for example, but the Miles Sanders owner doesn't want to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire straight up for Miles Sanders. You could throw in a guy like KJ Osborne as a sweetener or a biscuit on top of that trade to get that deal done so you can get off of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and onto Miles Sanders. So that's a pretty simple example. I think KJ Osborne can be used in a number of trades as a kind of sweetener to make sure that you're getting the appropriate value to upgrade your team. As you guys can see on the screen, KJ Osborne is a sweetener and not an every week starter because he is clearly the 3rd receiver on this team. I think Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are eventually going to kind of edge him out in terms of target share. I don't expect a 16% target share like I've seen out of KJ Osborne thus far. And even with him getting a 16% target share, we see Justin Jefferson with a 24%, Adam Thielen with a 22%. So I'm not worried about any of those guys. As you can see on the screen, it looks like the matchup advantage in this game is Justin Jefferson against Trey Flowers. So Justin Jefferson could be in for a big game in this one. Adam Thielen also with a pretty good matchup against DJ Reed as well. And then on the Seahawks side of things, we have Metcalf and Lockett, who are always in your lineup. But I really like this Seahawks stack in this one from a DFS perspective. As you guys can see, DK Metcalf on Patrick Peterson. Pat Pete used to be able to keep up with a guy like DK Metcalf, but I think he's lost a step a little bit with his advanced age. So DK Metcalf should be able to take advantage of that matchup. And Tyler Lockett against Mackenzie Alexander should be an easy matchup for him as well. Tyler Lockett's been phenomenal so far this year, so fire both of those guys up. And of course, there is no tight ends in this game that I'm willing to start. I suppose you could throw Gerald Everett as a desperation play and hope for a touchdown because this should be a higher scoring game. But I'm not really excited about any of the tight ends in this matchup. On Sunday Night Football, one of the last two games that we're going to talk about here, Packers at 49ers. I think you obviously will be starting Devontae Adams and Deebo Samuel. And I think you can desperation flex Brandon Ayuk. Now, I'm going to speak the Brandon Ayuk breakout into existence because I just traded for the guy, but he has a tough matchup in this one against Jair Alexander primarily. Hopefully he can get some work done anytime he's not on Jair, and maybe with Brandon Ayuk not being a factor, maybe Jair Alexander even shadows Deebo Samuel, which definitely could happen, but I think this could be another big game for Deebo Samuel. As you guys can see, he's slated to be up against Kevin King, which is not going to end well. If he sees any time against Kevin King, he's going to wipe the floor with that guy. And Eric Stokes, too, who's a rookie corner. I don't expect Deebo Samuel to have a down game in this one. He should have a pretty big outing. And I'm starting to admit that I might have to eat some crow on Deebo Samuel because I was lower on him coming into the season, and it's mainly because I was so high on Ayuk. So speaking of Ayuk, I just wanted to talk about this little nugget on him. If you guys own Brandon Ayuk and you're totally nervous like I am, according to Grant Cohn, who's a 49ers beat reporter, he thinks that Ayuk isn't getting the ball because of Jimmy Garoppolo and not because of Kyle Shanahan. Now, he's not on the field a whole lot, which is obviously because of Kyle Shanahan, but Ayuk's damage was done last year with Nick Mullins as the quarterback. And Cohn is saying basically that Shanahan is drawing up plays for Brandon Ayuk, but Jimmy G is being super conservative. So I'm saying basically free Trey Lance so we could get Brandon Ayuk some touches for God's sakes, because I think it's absolutely criminal that they're not using the guy. And you guys can check out that full article. I have it on the screen right now. On the Packers side of things, pretty straightforward. You start Devontae Adams because he's the best receiver in fantasy. I think he's going to absolutely smash this week. I've never seen this before, but his matchup advantage, according to PFF, is 99.9, which is, it sounds like the best you can possibly be against Demondor Lenore. It's not going to be a fun matchup for him. I think Devontae Adams is going to go absolutely hog wild in this game. Could be a 30, 40-point game. He would have scored a huge game last week against the Lions, but he didn't get into the end zone. I think he's going to get into the end zone in this one. At the tight end position, you start both George Kittle and Robert Tonyan as top 12 guys. A little odd for me seeing that George Kittle was not heavily involved in the first two matchups of the 49ers season so far, but that could be to the point of what I talked about with Jimmy Garoppolo as well. I think Kittle is going to rebound. He's going to start playing better. So if you can trade low for him, I would go ahead and do that. I'm not really worried about George Kittle. He's a super efficient tight end and he's super talented. So on to the final game of the slate. Monday Night Football, Eagles at Cowboys. Start Amari Cooper, start CeeDee Lamb, and flex Devontae Smith. Now, we don't really know what Amari Cooper's status is going to be for this game. He's currently banged up with a rib injury. It sounds like he bruised his ribs or something like that. But if he does play, he should be in a great spot in this one. He has been phenomenal against the Philadelphia Eagles over the course of his Cowboys career so far. So with Darius Slay not expected to shadow anyone, I guess Darius Slay has not shadowed in the first two games of the season, despite seeing Deebo Samuel and Calvin Ridley, who look to be clear number ones in their offense right now. So Darius Slay looked like he's going to be playing sides. Should see a lot of CeeDee Lamb in that matchup. If Cooper plays, I expect him to have a huge game in this one. If he doesn't play, CeeDee Lamb is the number one target on this team and should be started as a top 10 wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. So on the other side of things, and then we'll close this out, Devontae Smith expected to be shadowed by Trevon Diggs. And Trevon Diggs has been very good in these first two games this season. He's pretty much done the Lord's work against Mike Evans and Keenan Allen, holding them to relatively quiet games to their standards. So if he shadows Devontae Smith in this game, which it looks like he's going to, I don't really want to start Devontae Smith. Now, I'm going to throw him into my flex spot because you probably don't have another choice. But if you have better options, if you have Mike Williams, if you have somebody like that, I would start him over Devontae Smith because it could be a bit of a down game for him in this one. And another thing that I would like to say is that it could be a sneaky big game for Jalen Reagor against Anthony Brown, who we saw Antonio Brown torch. We saw Mike Williams torch last week. So I think this could be a sneaky Jalen Reagor game. I'm not ballsy enough to throw him into my lineup, but I think if you play any showdown Monday Night Football DFS, I think he's going to be a good play in that matchup. So that is all the matchups. That's all the wide receivers and tight ends, starts and sits. If you guys enjoyed this video, as always, go down to the bottom of the video and hit the like button. While you're down there, leave us any comments, any start sit questions that you have, any trade questions, any should I pick up this guy questions. We will answer them in the comment section. We're very active in the comments. So if you need a question answered, we will be happy to help you out. If we answer your question, please hit the subscribe button. It is totally free to do so. Helps us grow, helps us become a bigger channel and reach more audiences. So if you can do that, definitely appreciate it. As I said, if you want access to my weekly rankings, access to Danny's weekly rankings, all you have to do, go to our website, thefantasystockexchange.com. One of 3 ways you can get the rankings. $20 for PayPal on the website, Underdog Fantasy promo code FSE, or patreon.com/fantasystockexchange. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.